I got my vintage video. Let's go. One of the coolest things about making videos in 2022 is that we have a lot of tools at our disposal. Not only do we have the latest and greatest gear, but also everything that came before it. Sure, the old stuff might not have the highest resolution, most latitude, or dynamic range. It's certainly not the easiest to work with, but when used in the right context, it can be extremely effective.
Oh my goodness.
I can't believe that. For 20 bucks?
Dude, I'm getting this.
And that's why in this video, I want to talk about 3 reasons why shooting vintage video in this modern era is oh so relevant. Texture and authenticity, baby. Plus, it's super fun, even if a little frustrating. So I'll just cut to the chase and work my way backwards. The use of vintage video can serve a dual purpose in your video work. Number 1 is emotional. Since certain video formats do have a look or texture, it can often be associated with a collective memory. Using it in the right context can trigger an emotional connection, and no matter what discipline of filmmaking you're a part of, it's a connection we want to make. 8mm film, for example, has a nostalgic feel of the 1960s and 70s, back when it was the most popular format for home videos, so naturally when we see it now, in a way it transports us back in time because of that collective memory. Cue that piano. Now the same can be said for the 80s and 90s, where VHS and Hi8 dominated the home video markets. When audiences see these formats in use, the image texture is associated with the period they were popularized in. Now, certainly there's some craft on behalf of the filmmakers that's required to really exploit that emotional response, but it's a great place to start. Yes, I'm aware that 8mm film is not technically video, but we're gonna put video and film in the same context here. Number 2 is editorial. Well, certain formats of retro video will cut seamlessly with period-accurate archival footage, which can add a layer of authenticity to a film or video. An edit, by nature, can be very distracting, and there are a lot of things to consider when making a cut. A stark contrast between the glossy 4K footage and retro video archive can be visually distracting enough to pull the viewer out of the story, even for a second. A great way to soften this blow is by shooting elements in a film or video format that was popular at the time. It doesn't have to be a lot, just enough to help bridge the visual gap and leverage that collective memory. In this case, we shot portions of the drama in this World War II aviation documentary in 8mm film to intercut with modern cinema cameras. There are loads of examples where this multi-format technique is applied, and this next example might be my favorite.
It's showtime.
HBO's Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty, has taken this concept and just ran with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet your Los Angeles Lakers.
Dramatizing the events that led to the rise of the LA Lakers in the early 80s, the filmmakers wanted to create a built-in world that was period accurate. Now, the series was shot using various Super 35, Super 16, and Max 8mm film formats, but interesting enough, the production also bought a number of Ikegami broadcast cameras to use in the production as well, which were the cameras that were most widely used for sporting events of the early 80s. The use of multiple formats that were period accurate really helped make the narrative feel more authentic. And when intercutting with the real-world archive from the era, the editorial is seamless. Through experimentation, it was discovered that using these old vintage video cameras worked really well for emotional scenes because of their raw image texture. In the end, the filmmakers created a unique visual style that looks and feels period accurate, while also creating visual contradictions that would evoke emotional feelings within a scene.
We all calling you Cap, but you ain't leading shit round here.
The Blair Witch Project. Remember that film? It's not really a contemporary example, but it's still a good example.
I don't know why you have to have every conversation on video.
Because we're making a documentary.
Not about us getting lost. We're making a documentary about a witch.
This film fooled the world into thinking, to some degree, the events depicted in the film were factual. The film looked nothing like a typical feature film. Released in 1999, but set in 1994, a small group of filmmakers set out to do a documentary on the Blair Witch, and the story was told from their perspective. Using black and white 60mm film and VHS video in a very self-aware shooting style, it felt like you were watching a home video of a group of students making a student film. This was all set up at the start by some simple text stating how this was found footage, and right at the gate, everything you're watching feels authentic.
Tell me where you are, John!
This was not traditionally a beautiful looking film by any means, but it didn't matter. It made a crap load of money and people are still talking about it. Well, some of us are. Number 3, it's fun.
How's the mini DV doing over there? How's the footage looking? It's looking all right?
I personally love working with old video formats I cut my teeth on when I was younger. I'm always looking at finding ways to implement them into my own video work, which I did quite successfully recently, but I'll get to that a little bit later. This is weird, I have no idea what this is gonna look like, but I am right now currently vlogging on the XL1. What's up guys, my name is Mark, and this is my Minolta 50mm f1.7 vintage lens review. Although this lens technically isn't vintage, I think this one is from like the 1990s, so it's kind of like millennial. It's a millennial lens. It's the millennial lens. That's my title. I recently wrapped up cutting 2 episodes of a 90s era documentary series, and in that series we use a lot of archival footage, which was of course period accurate, so lots of beta, VHS, and high-8 sources. The image quality didn't matter so much because it's the 90s, it's authentic. Now, as part of the storytelling process of the series, we did have some dramatic recreation of certain key moments. Now, these were shot using high-end 4K cameras, because for streaming services and broadcasters, you need to have a certain amount of 4K footage per episode to be 4K eligible. To help bring back a layer of authenticity to the series, and in a way, an excuse for me to use my high-8 Sony, my Canon XL1, and my Panasonic DVX100A cameras again, I pitched shooting some select moments with these cameras to help bridge the visual gap between the standard def analog look to the digital 4K. Now, I can say using the real thing worked out really well, and it was one of the most fun series I've worked on in a while. As the gear continues to technically evolve, I do think these older formats are going to get more popular the farther and farther we get away from those eras. Who knows what we'll be using in 25 years, so if history is any indicator, these images we see now are going to feel nostalgic in their own right. Anyway, if you did make it this far, thanks for sitting through this, kind of something I wanted to get off my chest for a while now. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. I'm gonna turn this DVX100A into skate mode. Oh yeah, skate mode. This is also known as the JACKASS camera. There's a scene where Johnny Knoxville is riding on a golf cart and they go over this jump. He's recording with this camera. The cart bails, the camera bails and gets smashed everywhere. JACKASS camera.
Justice!